Now, the way I build IGVG is going to be controversial because there are like 3 or 4 different ways to build IGVG. The mandatory issue that IGVG has is you run out of perk slots, and you want to be running a decent amount of perks. So the mandatory things for IGVG are Deep Freeze as your offhand, which you can get this week. Okay, I didn't mean to click that. And you need to have magnetic gauntlets, or it's argued that you need to have magnetic gauntlets. I would argue magnetic gauntlets are not necessary for IGVG, and instead for refreshing with something like Void Darkplate can be better in certain situations. But in terms of the meta build, it is you go magnetic gauntlets. You go Deep Freeze. There are 2 artifacts for here that are good. The first one is you can go Ankh. Ankh is ideal. The other one that is really good is Blood Drinker. And the reason why Blood Drinker is good is because the dot effects from your VG do heal per dot effect off the Ghoul's Harmony, so there's inherent synergy to going Blood Drinker. It does not work off the damage over time effect on Deep Freeze. This is one of the only classes in the game where it's not completely troll to go this ring. No mag gauntlets, 44% compared to 77 to 84. Oh, in terms of crit chance? Yeah, you can get pretty high crit chance without them too. Why Deep Freeze over Life Taker? Just damage? So the original reason why people went Deep Freeze over Life Taker was because Life Taker had a bug, and for some reason, the like 1 second cooldown to the dot effect was like applying to other abilities as well. Like there was a cooldown problem that was like causing your orb to not do as much damage, and also it was scaling incorrectly. I believe they fixed the scaling to some extent, so you probably could go Life Taker now, but Deep Freeze is still a bigger DPS bonus. I think it is arguable to go Life Taker assuming that bug is fixed though. Do you guys care if I build this for Blood Drinker or if I build this for Ankh? Like, do you want me to do a pure Abyss one for this one and build it for Ankh, or should I do Blood Drinker because you can't get Ankh yet unless you're, like, insanely high level at the PvP track? Like, does anyone have a preference for that? Because I can build it either way, and I don't really care which way I build it. Or I can let you guys debate that decision and just go through the other stuff real quick, too. So, you want Gorgons? This is a heavy build. You want this all in heavy? Reason being is people like to hit IGVGs, and you want to be tanky. This used to be a class that was played in light. Not as popular to play in light anymore. The reason why originally it was played in light was because the light dodge was really good for creating distance. You can double dodge into a clump with high con light builds, drop Oblivion, and everyone would die. Because Oblivion would override Sacred. Build it with Ankh? Okay. We build that with Ankh. We want Gorgon here. You could arguably run Teardrop for this build as well, by the way. Is Teardrop that much better for this build? I think Teardrop's a little bit better than a normal thing. Still. I am a very, very big Refreshing Ward fan though. Like, you don't have to go Teardrop. It's just like, for every build I play, it just feels like Teardrop is a better thing to go than any other offhand for some reason. Or any other earring. If I have the chance to run it, I run it. Pre-Bis and pre-Bis builds. I mean, I could show you the minimum requirement for this build. You need Nullifying Oblivion. You need Scream. And your magnetic, if I have a Gorgon thing here. Here. That is your Prebis. Nothing else matters. You need Diminishing Orb. You need to hit Scream. You need to hit Nullifying Oblivion. If you don't hit anything else, this is still playable. It's not going to be fun to play, but you can play it with this bad of gear. If I play IG Rapier, how much in light, how much of my troll am I? In PvE, you're not a troll. In PvE, you're trolling outside of a 1v1. So, I mean, that is, like, I am very, very bare bones as a player. This is, like, when I was playing VG VG Flail the other day. This is basically all I hit, and I was playing VG Flail. Was it fun? No. Did it work? Yes. In terms of what you want on your Ankh, usually for war, this is strike protection. I think at this point, I might say thrust for general play, because 99% of players play OPR in open world, and the thrust protection will be generally more helpful than strike protection, because strike protection only exists in war. If you're a war player, you should probably put strike protection on here. Also, if you're a war player, Ankh might be trolled because you just don't get, or if you're not a war player, Ankh might be trolled because you just don't get healed at all. So just go the other ring. On your ring, you want Hardy. You want Purifying Heart. Third perk, you have a few options. You can go for Healing Breeze, which I think is a little bit less good. You can go for Infected, which is a more of a CC disease-oriented IGVG build. Or you can go for Refreshing. I think Refreshing is the best of all those. On your other perks for this, let's just lock in a random Rune Glass gem. We probably, for the Rune Glass gem for this build, there's two that are very popular. Moonstone is very, very popular. At one point, Opal was popular. It feels a little bit more awkward now. I feel like one of these is relatively popular as well. Like, you just go for any kind of dot-oriented one. Other perks on here, usually people go Keen, and then they go for Plagued Crits. I would argue, if you have Magnetic Gauntlets, you don't really have to go Keen, and you could pick up a different perk here. So, some options for this. I mean, I'd just go Alacritus Punishment, to be honest. Like, even though you don't do a lot of damage with this build, like, this is, like, a really good perk to pick up, and you can pick it up at that point. So, like, that would be your other option. You can go Keen, you can go Alacritus Punishment. Both of them are pretty good. Wouldn't Slash Protection be better? No, because I would argue that you should go Slash Conditioning. You should have 3 Slash Conditioning in general. This is also one of the only classes in the game I generally recommend going for Shirking Fortification. And the reason why is this will mitigate more damage versus melees on average than another weapon perk. And just, like, has relatively high uptime for this class. You do not have to go Shirking Fortification. That is an optional perk. You can kind of go whatever you want there. The other thing that you really want for this class is at least 2 Freedom. You notice we're not going Health. And then the last slots I would fill with Refreshing. So actually we should put a Freedom here. Put a Refreshing in here. Put a Refreshing over here, and that should maximize our Refreshing. So that's 4 Refreshing. So we filled up all of our slots. We hit Refreshing cap. We hit our 2 Freedom threshold that we want. We have a good amount of damage mitigation, and we hit our weapon perks. That's what I would consider to be BIS. BIS or light if you look overall. Thank you. Totally messed that up. I clicked the bottom thing. The bottom thing was not heavy for that class for some reason. Is this still Slash? Do we hit our 3 Slash? 1. Yep, 2 Shirking Fort. And Refreshing. I think. Nope, that's 5 Refreshing. What's our last perk? Freedom. So this is like, this is a hybrid kind of armor setup between EU and NA. Now, there's 2 philosophies with IGVG. One of the philosophies is you don't need Refreshing, you don't want to spam ability, or you don't need more Refreshing for your VG, and you shouldn't be spamming your IG abilities. My philosophy for this class is, if you can go Shower into what do you call it? Into Storm, into Tomb, into Shower, why wouldn't you just do the 4 Refreshing? Like, that's what you can do when you have 4 Refreshing. You can go semi-infinite, You can't go infinite like you could at one point when the tomb was double procking, but you can go semi-infinite with this build. No hasted vigor. I don't think you could run with this build, I'm not gonna lie. Most builds like hasted vigor kind of make sense. This is a build that like you are stuck. You are not getting away. You have 0 movement abilities. Your entire kit, like if I were to put this out, is like hella defensive. Like you're not getting away. Like you could try it, but I'm telling you, you're not getting away. If someone chases you, you're dead in the water. Like you're done. You can kind of chill with something like this. By the way, on the earring, how come no fortifying toast? Because refreshing ward is stupid. So like, say I'm getting chased, right, by a hatchet player. Like, I could tank the hits, have refreshing ward proc. That refreshing ward proc then can give me my tomb back or can give me my ice shower back and I get out. Like, that's the value you get with refreshing ward. It feels like you get your cooldowns back, like, relatively quickly. You don't have to run refreshing ward, though. You can cut this. You can go something else. I know 2% doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it feels very, very good in practice to me. Unlike every single build I play. If you don't like it, switch it out for something else there. The earring is like very, very flexible for this kind of class. Your VG tree is very, very standard, something like this. The one thing that's like kind of debatable is you can cut one of these perks and try to pick up Mending Evasion. Like Leashing Agony, like you could probably cut that, pick up Mending Evasion if you wanted to do some cheesy proc thing. What should I put on Featherweight for 3rd perk? Generally, I'd say weapon perk early on if you can't find gear with weapon perks, but that's like not ideal. I'd say slash conditioning is generally pretty good on Featherweight for multiple builds too. So in terms of food for this, let's go rabbit for now. Do we have too much con? We have too much con with rabbit. Okay. Time to get a little bit interesting. I have no idea what the int food is called. And honestly, I don't even want to run the int food. We're going grab it. Like I do not want to break out the int food. It's way more expensive. You want 50 focus with this? Dump the rest in the intelligence. Now, you do get a spot like here where it's like, I have 22 extra stat points when it's bis, right? And I could put them in the con or something like that. Like, I could do 2 in the con. There is an avenue where you try to get to 250 int because that will increase the duration of your rend effects. I think that would be particularly good if you go for the heal-based, like, blood drinker setup. If you don't go for that, though, there is an argument to pick up 25 dex for extra crit chance, because that crit chance will help you get your CDR up faster. Honestly, you do not need to pick up the 25 dex. But it's probably... I mean, honestly, it's not even that much more useful than the 25 con. How much health do we pick up if we go 25? So we're at 290. If we go up to 395. Wait, do we just lose health or am I tripping? I'm definitely tripping. Okay, we pick up like 600 HP. Like, do you want 600 HP or 5% crit chance? In my eyes, it literally doesn't matter. I'll do the crit chance because it looks spicy and something like that, but it literally doesn't matter. What's the benefit of Shirking Fort over Frigid Dawn? So, say you go Frigid Dawn, right? Frigid Dawn would mean that you can't run slash conditioning because now I need my Nullifying Oblivion. I can't stack my refreshing. I can't stack my refreshing here. I miss out on either a freedom or a slash conditioning. You probably miss out on the slash conditioning. If you go Frigid Dawn, that will be a good amount of damage mitigation, but I think it will end up being less damage mitigation than Shirking Fort for this particular circumstance. And you miss out on utility bonuses. Now, there is one thing that is debatable that you could run with this build, but at this point in time, it seems rare enough where I'm going to stop recommending that people like try to get this piece because it seems relatively difficult to get. but you could go for the warm heavy boots. So these have keen speed on them. They have freedom on them. That's pretty dang good on IGVG if you could pick it up. I don't think like 99% of players will be able to pick this up, so I'm gonna generally stop like putting these into guides because I think it's just too rare of a piece to get. This is a really good piece to get for this build though. The keenly empowered on the heavy legs is also decent. It's another option. So that's the base thing. Your heart rune for this build is almost always vines. Wait, it's the rend one, right? Yeah. Make sure you have a honing stone. Make sure you have desert sunrise. It's a little bit less mandatory. Make sure you have energizing hearty meals, because that will gen your mana. On your consumes, I go a similar route as I talked about before, where I'm a little bit more unorthodox with this build. I tend to recommend oak flesh for this build, because this is a build that is like the prime target for melee players, and like you really don't want to die. This is also one of those only builds that uses a lot of mana that I'd still recommend going serums for, because you need the stamina in order to dodge. Oblivion goes on glove, not hitting plague cap with this one. No, the main reason why you go scream here. So we could do a scream versus orb analysis. It's probably nice to do for this build. Yeah, that looks right. So let me do this side by side. This is one that is really important to realize, and most people make this mistake. Diminishing orb. Okay. So scream. If it's on weapon, it's a 44% disease, 22% to healers. If it's on armor, it's 33%. So my net loss, or I guess I could do my net gain from going to weapon from armor is a third in power. Diminishing orb, if it's on weapon, it's 75%. If it's armor, it's 38%. So what's 75 divided by 38? That's almost twice as good. Do you want 1/3 of the benefit of a perk, or do you want twice as good of a perk? I would argue you want twice as good of a perk. It does not matter if you can't hit plague cap, because there should be other builds that also could help you do plague. So that's why I recommend going for diminishing orb on Void Gauntlet. Some people disagree with that. I don't think it's a long list at this point of like experienced players that disagree with that, but a lot of like newer players tend to disagree with that. But that is why. Alright, on this one, emeralds are kind of nice because you passively have this effect if you're using Ice Storm, and that's mostly what it matters for. In terms of gem split, this is one that I think you should generally go a little bit more physical than standard. I would argue do a 10-10. Like, I am very, very anti-physical at this build, because this is a build that does not lose to ranged very hard, but loses to melee very, very hard. So you want to, like, game it so that you're better at surviving versus melee. Also, if people collapse on you with a detonate and you can't get out of the clump, you're dead. I don't think there's a way around that. It's just a positioning issue at that point. Like, you are just dead. You can go elemental aversion, you will also just be dead. You'll be dead to the melees. If you don't go elemental aversion, you go shirking fort, there's a small chance you'll live if they don't strip it. If they strip it, you have to dodge again so it reapplies, otherwise you're dead. So just beware of that. Like, if you get caught in a clump, even with this gear, with this build, you probably will just die. But this is like kind of the setup that I would generally recommend and feels very, very good. Noteworthy, it is a very, very expensive set to get missed out. And your your minimum perks are basically just hit Nullify and Oblivion, hit Scream, and run like half decent armor perks. I'd argue you really want to hit the 3/ conditioning if you could help it. The refreshing is really nice to have. The Shrinking Fort's really nice to have. And there's a very big difference in how this build plays when you have Bisp gear to like very cheap gear, because you're just able to survive so much more attacks. And again, this thrust protection would be strike protection in a war. It'd be thrust protection outside of war. So, yeah, that's how I would build IGVG in general. There are a lot of different variants of this. Like, a lot of people, myself included, typically would say just cut Keen. Like, you can cut Keen for this for either Disdained Infliction, which would increase the potency of your outgoing dot effects. Disdained Infliction also makes a lot of sense if you're going for that other ring that does more damage, because that will just mean that you're healing more off of your dots. The other one that kind of makes sense is Alacritus Punishment, but just more damage. Keen is okay. It's not that good of a perk. Honestly, heavily overrated for this class. One of the reasons why I say it's heavily overrated is that Void Gauntlet, I can't show it in game. Void Gauntlet has a base 8% critical hit chance. What this means in New World in the current state of the game is that if you miss a crit, your next crit has this base multiplier added to it. So if I say I go for a crit once, I miss. Okay, my next hit has a 16% chance to crit. I miss again. Okay, my next hit has a 24% chance to crit. And that would apply on things like Orb and stuff like that. So Keen is the equivalent of hitting one more player effectively and missing a crit. So it's like, it's really not that good. Honestly, I'm talking myself out of Keen at this point. Like, the dot-based potency is okay. It doesn't really improve ult charge. It is your main source of damage output, though, because this is a very dot-centric build. So it kind of makes sense to run that. But, yeah, like, I'm not a huge believer in the Keen stuff. Like, maybe even cut the stacks, throw it in the Constitution. It doesn't really matter in my eyes. Like, it's like you can go that, you can not go that. Like, your crit chance will effectively basically be the same. I still have a 68% crit chance, for crying out loud. Like, and that's with me cutting the 5% there and the 7% on weapon. If I have both of those, it's like an 80% chance of crit. The main downside of cutting your crit chance is there's times where you won't be able to go infinite as often with this build, and going infinite can feel rather strong. So, like, you can basically just go Oblivion, Scream, Orb, Oblivion, Scream, Orb, Oblivion, Scream, Orb, and you just start chunking through all your mana, but you can do that. And it's like one of the most powerful parts about this build.